great compilation tape. Like breaking up is hard to do and takes ages longer than it might seem. You got to kick it off with a killer to grab attention. Then you got to take it up a notch. But you don't want to blow your wad, so then you got to cool it off a notch. There are a lot of rules.
12 albums, 1 cent. Find our ad in Sunday's paper. Take it to your mailbox. You'll get a lot more music. You'll get a lot more life. Look in your Sunday paper.
Welcome, listener. For those about to rock, we salute you. This is our podcast dedicated to exploring and talking about the greatness that was the music of the best decade. If you're ready for the best in retro music topics on the planet, we present for your enjoyment 80's Mixtape Auto Reverse.
Oh. Hello.
Hey guys.
Hey Tim. How's the headphones?
They're, when you actually have them plugged in and on your head,
they work really good.
Awesome. All right. So how was your week?
Not over yet. It's not over yet, man.
There's one more day.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. Yeah, well.
Unless you're not well, so far it's been okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Busy, sounds like.
Yeah.
Tim, we never got to talk about your cruise, man.
There's a lot to talk about. I mean, it was cool, and it's funny. Right now, this weekend on the same ship, there's one of those metal cruises. It's either,
it's the same ship, huh?
Monsters. Yeah, it's either Monsters of Rock or 70,000 tons of metal. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's like what is it? I think Winger's part of it, and who else? I saw
There's
a
a
lineup.
bunch.
I can't remember now.
Yeah, those things are insane. There's just so many bands, and now that I've been on the ship, I want to know where they play, because there isn't. It's surprise. I don't know if you guys have been on a cruise before. This was my first time. There's not really that much room.
No, not particularly.
It depends on the boat.
Well, but the one I was on, since it's just ironic that, or not ironic, but coincidental that I have knowledge of this boat because I was just on it.
Yeah.
Not that much room. When we were there, the pool, like on the upper level, the outdoor pool, there's an area where the flux capacitors played. Those are the guys. They're like the official mascot band of Back to the Future. They're an 80's cover band.
Okay.
And it was, they had a decent sized stage, but like the pool is directly in front of the stage. And the pool is 6 feet deep, so a lot of people can't comfortably stand in the pool and watch the band. So you got like this big empty space directly in front of the band. And then off to the sides, you've got where everyone's like sitting in their lounge chairs. It's kind of a weird vibe for a concert,
So they don't have like a they didn't have like a theater set up in the boat. Like the cruise that I went on, they had like a theater room where there was one day that we went and played bingo, and it was like they had a full stage and like an auditorium. So
yeah, there is when the one I was on, it was a movie theater because they were showing films and stuff too, because it was a Comic-Con, they were showing all kinds of stuff. So yeah, it didn't even occur to me that they could certainly have bands playing in there.
Right.
So, and that's, I'm sure, what they're doing, because otherwise I don't know how you can accommodate all those bands. Like, it's not like they're all going to share gear, right? I mean, this guy's going to want to have their own stuff, so you got to load in and out in between sets. And if you're sharing one stage for 100 bands, I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah, I was looking at the lineup here, and it's not a lineup. It's just all the bands in alphabetical order. But there's tons. Anthrax.
So which cruise is it? Is it the 70,000 tons one, or is it
70,000 tons of metal? Yeah.
That's pretty funny for a title. That's good stuff.
Overkill, lots of Testament. So, I mean, there's a bunch on here I've never heard of, so I don't know if they're new or older or something like that, but pretty interesting. I didn't even know something like that existed, so that's pretty neat.
I thought the 70,000 tons one was in Europe somewhere, like on the Mediterranean or something like that. I didn't realize it was here.
Yeah, Fort Lauderdale actually left. It's from February 2nd to 6th.
Yeah. No, I mean, because I've heard of it. The 70,000 tons thing has been around for a few years.
Yeah, and then there's the one on Royal Caribbean, the Monsters of Rock thing. Vince Neil, Tom Kiefer, Night Ranger, Queensryche, Striper, Slaughter, Kicks, Danger, Y&T.
When is that one?
This one is also February 2nd to 7th. So they leave at the same time. And this is Cozumel. Tampa. Oh, this one came out of Tampa. Cayman Islands, Cozumel. So it's all Caribbean. But there's Killer Dwarfs is on this one.
Okay, so that's what I'm trying to figure out. Which one are you talking about when you say the Killer Dwarfs?
This is the Monsters of Rock one.
Okay, so the Monsters of Rock cruise is on the ship I was on.
Right. Yeah, that comes out of Tampa. It's on Royal Caribbean Cruise Line.
Right.
The brilliance of the seas was...
You went out of Tampa, right, Tim?
Yeah.
Danger, Lynch Mob, Saigon Kick. Now, there's a ton of bands on here.
That's more pop metal. That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, the other one seemed a lot heavier. There's definitely, I recognize some death metal bands on there and stuff like that. So this is definitely a little Kid. There's Kip Winger, John Corabi, Girls School, Faster Pussycat, Tora. Wow, pretty neat. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's funny too because our cruise. Yeah, so we left Tampa. We went to we went to Key West, and then we went to Cozumel. And it was funny when we were docked in Cozumel, we got off the boat, and there was another boat right there sharing the same dock that we were on, and there was this huge, gargantuan Titanic banner on the side of the ship, and it was like the Legends of Rock cruise. So it was funny because I was trying to who's on that cruise? And then some dude was walking by and he had a T-shirt, so I was trying to read the back of his T-shirt. And it was like Pat Benatar, Neil Giraldo, and it was like, whoa, okay, those heritage acts, let's call them, stuff like that. Thin Lizzy was on there, and Artemis Pyle from what's he from, Leonard Skinner or something, or Molly Hatchet, one of those guys, So it was cool, but it wasn't like something I would. The stuff Chris is reading off, that's one I'd like to go to.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty neat. I didn't even know something like that existed.
Dude, they've been very popular for like the last year and a half or two. Huh, they've been popping up. Yeah, and now they have a thing in... I'm trying to remember what island it is, but you can go to I think it's in the Caribbean somewhere, where you can go and see all these 80s metal bands at an island somewhere, and it's a package deal, and it's not just a cruise, but they're becoming very popular. It's a way for all these bands to have a.
It's a way for them to have an
income at this time, yeah. Because when's the last time you heard a Lynch Mob or Saigon Kick?
I know. So where do we stand tonight? We're doing the third selection and then shout-outs and stuff like that? Is that where we picked two last time, right?
Yeah, we picked
we only got two because we talked about Motley Crue for 45 minutes, I think.
Yeah, I know.
All right, let me see. I gotta pull up the Twitter for the shout-outs, so go ahead. Why don't we get... I guess I'll do the intros and get started. What do you think? Ready?
Yeah, ready when you guys are. If you guys are
cool. Ready. Welcome back to another episode of 80's Mixtape Auto Reverse. We're going to be covering part 2 of 1989. Tim and Chris both made it a point that they have plenty more to talk about. I don't have a lot to cover on this the rest of the year. I just don't remember some of the ones that had a bigger impact on me. So... we're going to start off and introduce, we got Chris, as usual, and Tim, another one of the usual suspects, and myself, Scott. So we'll get started. Which one?
Right on.
All right, let's go with Tim first.
All right. Well, I debated and thought long and hard about this, but I am going to go with a German band called Victory. And this was, I think, their 4th studio album called Culture Killed the Native. They had one video on MTV for the song "Don't Tell No Lies." It's kind of a bluesy mid-tempo rocker. But what I really like about this band is they're mostly German. Their singer on this album, they switched singers. Their first three, they had an American, Charlie Hoon, I think is how you say his last name. He had been in Ted Nugent's band, and he's actually still kicking. He's singing with Foghat right now. He's been with Foghat for a long time. But he was their first singer, and then they got a Spaniard named Fernando Garcia, and he kind of had the pretty boy looks, which everybody needed in 1989 to get noticed. But he had a great voice too, and the rest of the music, aside from that single, which like I say was pretty bluesy, it's really good, efficient German. You know, there's a little bit of a Scorpions vibe to it. It's very melodic. They had some of the production tricks of the time with the big layered choruses, but the songs they're all to the point. They're punchy. They all have good choruses. Some of them rock, you know, there's definitely some metal on there, and there's just good commercial hard rock with nice solos. Two guitar players, Herman Frank, who had spent some time in Accept and then went on to join several other bands. He's still pounding them out too as a solo artist now. And Tommy Newton, who might be more known as a producer than a guitarist. He's done a lot of production work over the years, including for Gamma Ray, which is another one of my favorite German bands. But yeah, Victory, they had a U.S. record deal for a long time, but just never really made a mark. And this album really, to me, it coalesced really nicely. It's kind of got crappy cover art, so it wouldn't have stood out on the shelves in the record stores, but you know, musically speaking, it's just tight, good German commercial hard rock metal. They put out a bunch more albums afterwards. I don't think any of them got released in the U.S., you know, one of those kind of bands, but they're one moment of glory. And what's really cool also for me is I'm a huge fan of Michael Schenker. And in this time frame, Michael Schenker had teamed up with an Irish singer named Robin McAuley, and they put a few albums out. Well, McAuley sings backing vocals on this Victory album, and you can really clearly hear his voice. So that, for me, as a fan of his, that's another little cherry on top of this album. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Victory or this album or that song. I don't know if you got any thoughts.
I've never heard of them.
You got me too. I don't know this band at all, but I do know Robin McAuley. Have seen Robin McAuley live at, I want to say, it wasn't the Penny Road Pub. Tim, you know where that is, though, right?
Yeah, that's like 20 minutes from my house.
Yeah, there's another venue out there. I can't remember the name of it, which one we saw him at, but we saw Robin McAuley a few years back. It was a pretty good performance too. Yeah, I don't know this band at all though.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've heard of Macaulay Schenker.
Yeah, MSG.
That group, the two of them together, definitely I've heard of that. But yeah, Victory is one on me. I've never even heard of that band. So it is kind of Scorpions-ish, though. You said a little bit, or
a little
or
bit,
a lot,
a little bit. It's more overproduced. It's not as raw as some of the Scorpions stuff. But
I don't even see it. I don't see them on the list even. Victory.
Yeah, that's how I guess overlooked they were.
Wow. Okay.
No, they do have a Wikipedia page because I did look it up, and they actually had studio albums from 85 to 2011. So, yeah, I mean, they had, 8, 9, 10, looked like maybe 10 studio albums.
And they're all good.
And it's stuck around. So here's the thing about, I mean, you figure, like, and they're German, Tim?
Yeah.
From Germany?
Yep.
See, you just think that why a band like that it's just a mental part of, excuse me, why did a band like that get overlooked? Because, you would think if the Scorpions came around and had something of a popularity, which obviously they did, and then later they get more popular, but that something like this, like, where's the A&R guy that didn't, promote this? What record company were they with that didn't push them to, you know what I mean? So it's like, because I'll totally take your word for it, Tim, that it's a good band. So it's kind of like, how did this band get left behind when bands like Scorpions, Accept, Halloween, even these German bands I have heard of, but yeah, Victory never, I don't think I've ever heard of them. Certainly, I don't believe I've heard a song unless it was just something by accident on satellite radio or something like that. But
they were on Rampage Records, which was a division of Rhino Records. So not the. I mean, there were a couple other cool bands I remember on this label, but it wasn't like a powerhouse label or anything. But I mean, they did get on MTV, so just didn't catch fire.
Yeah, and there's the part of that too is the Rhino Records. That was a whole weird thing that happened with Rhino Records back then, because Rhino was not noted for heavy metal at any point in the original Rhino record kind of lineup. And if I'm not mistaken, totally out of memory, that label was bought, or at least the name was bought, and they tried to diversify and capitalize on the fact that people knew what Rhino was from like the 50s and 60s. And it never really worked out for them. Just never worked out, because I think Rhino Records was a long time, 60s, 70s, late 60s, early 70s. I don't think they went back to the 50s, but definitely was that point. And they kind of folded and came back. So it's just interesting, like a band like that obviously, has talent, how they get lost in the shuffle like that.
Yeah, Victory was a bit of an ironic band name, I guess, all things considered, but they're good. You guys definitely need to check them out. Culture Killed the Native is the name of the album.
Okay. Yeah. I did read that album title, because I had to look at Wikipedia. I had to find them. But that's one that I bookmarked so I can listen to it, because I do like the Scorpions. So if there's anything kind of like that, even a small piece of it, that's something I'd like to. I like the Scorpions. So who's up?
Chris, why don't you?
What's your?
I got nothing on Victory, so.
Okay, I was going to say, what's your break? All right, I'll go next. A band's one of a favorite of mine, and I'm going to say this, and it's kind of put myself out there a little bit, but I think during this whole time period, mid to late 80s and into now, and then even a little bit into the 90s, probably one of the most underrated metal bands, hard rock bands, whatever you want to call them, of that whole genre, and that's Tesla. And the Great Radio Controversy. It's a band that I think they are unbelievably, they had a ton of success. So it's not like they didn't have success. It's not the same situation as Victory. Like these guys they had album sales success, they had commercial success, MTV success, the whole deal. But I still think they're better than what they did, or than what they got. I just think they're fantastic. Their musicianship is unparalleled in their little genre niche, and I think they're fantastic. This particular album, there's Radio Shots, Heaven's Trail, The Way It Is, Love Song, Paradise. Those replayed all over the radio for a very long time. It's always a big Frank Hannon fan. I think he's one of the, again, underrated kind of lead. Even though this kind of band was a double lead a little bit, Tommy Skeoch played some lead and they kind of flipped back and forth. But Frankie Hannon, just absolutely incredible. So this was a favorite album of mine, and I still have Tesla on my Spotify. I still whip some of their music out now and then. But I thought it was a great, great, great album. Great album, and definitely one that if you haven't listened to, or anybody out there hasn't listened to, or listened to and kind of forgot about it, it's really, really, really good, and produced by that famous late 80s, early 90s team of Stephen Thompson and Michael Barbiero, who did Appetite for Destruction. They've won Grammys. It's a fantastic recording engineering duo off the Geffen tree, from Geffen Records and all those. He had some work. They worked a little bit on Justice for All with Metallica, so they have a broad scope from Ziggy Marley, Aretha Franklin, Korn. Just very, very talented duo. So it's, again, got to have that backing part to these albums. It's no mistake that a lot of these people, again, like I said a couple of times, that a lot of the same people involved in this process are involved in the process of a lot of successful albums. It's not a coincidence. It takes that sometimes. So I don't know what you guys think about this album, but it's definitely from this year. I didn't want to leave it out of my top 3 because it translates to a lot of listening into it now. So that's kind of why I put it in that category of, okay, I still listen to it 20-some years later.
Like this pick. I like it a lot. You guys know I've picked Tesla in the past, and they're one of my favorite bands from back then. And I agree with you. They were kind of not as well recognized as they might have deserved. Still pretty popular, though. I love a few of these songs. Hang Tough. Heaven's Trail is a really cool song. I like that one. I've always liked that one. Lady Luck is kind of a fun song. It's a good tune. And all the rest of them, Yesterday's Gone is another good one. The Way It Is, that had a lot of radio play, and Love Song had a lot of radio play. They're all, this album, I remember, was a pretty decent album. I haven't listened to it lately, other than a couple of the songs that pop up on my iPod once in a while, like Heaven's Trail and Hang Tough and Lady Luck. Those first 3 tracks were always kind of in my constant rotation of CDs or mixtapes,
Mm-hmm.
Or mixed CDs, whatever you want to call them at that time. By that time, it started getting better as far as getting them on CD. Anyway, so yeah, I like this pick a lot. I love Tesla, just one of my favorites, especially coming off their first album. When I heard their first album, I was hooked right away with Coming At You Live, and I've always liked their guitar work and their little bit of bluesy and their Jeff Keith's vocals or that raspy voice that he's got. It's easy to listen to and it's very fun. So
very gritty. Gritty voice. Yeah,
it's like he just drank 3 glasses of whiskey and had like 5 packs of cigarettes.
Right, but
but it sounds good. It sounds good. It doesn't sound bad at all.
He could also do a little bit of that heavy metal screech kind of thing, and he did like later with the acoustic thing that they did. He can also tone it down a little bit, which is a totally different way of singing. So. I'm glad you liked it. I figured you would too, because I don't know, you might have picked you might have picked Tesla before. I think you did.
Oh, I definitely. The first album I picked.
Yeah.
I think that was 86.
Should have been 86.
87. 86.
Mechanical Resonance.
Yeah, 86, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good year.
Yeah, it was.
So,
what you got, Tim? What you got for us, Tim?
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't go wrong with Tesla in this time frame. Although, some people maybe I'm in this group, look back on Tesla with a little bit of a, because they did usher in the whole acoustic thing, which I wasn't a huge fan of.
Unplugged, baby. It's all about unplugged. No, you know what? I have to say that I think it was Bon Jovi that started that all.
Yeah, I was good. They were the first with the MTV.
The
MTV Awards.
Whatever it was,
yeah.
I think that really kicked it off. But then Tesla followed up pretty quickly and made it bigger with the 5-man acoustical jam.
Yeah, Tim is right, because they took that from just a couple of guys at an award show to actually it went over so well that they made a tour on it.
Yeah.
So Tim is right. So that they do need to take a little bit of blame for offering it. Well, I think, and again, I'm just going totally off memory. This could be totally off base, but I am going on that as saying that, if I'm not mistaken, that gave MTV the idea of the Unplugged series.
That's where I was headed with this.
Okay, yes, I totally agree with that.
So, in a sense, Tim, yes, I do backtrack on that. They are absolutely responsible for that, and therefore they're horrible, and I would like to pick another band.
Come on.
But before all the acoustic stuff, though, you can't deny how good they were, and it was cool that, again, kind of what I was talking about a little bit last week, I like my rock stars to look like rock stars. These guys didn't necessarily, they didn't dress up, they didn't get pretty or fancy, but they still look cool. And one of the best shows I ever saw was from this time frame. It was a co-headlining tour between Tesla and Great White, with Badlands opening up for them, and that was just awesome. You had really good, talented bands with great guitar players, great singers, and it wasn't a lot of poofy hair and frills. It was just 3 bands that came out and punched you in the gut with good, solid hard rock. I don't know about if I call it metal, but and it was just a great tour. And Tesla, to me, this was the height of their powers, I think. I did get burned out on Love Song, played that a little too much, but every band's ballad got played too much back then during this time frame.
Yeah, that's what I like to call those. I like to call those the Denim and Marshalls tours, where it's just a bunch of guys in jeans with Marshall stacks, and that here's your heavy metal. There's no makeup, there's a lot of different stuff. It just and it's ironic too that you say that, Tim, because that sort of started the acceptance of that kind of look. You know what I mean? A lot of bands started to do that, and then all of a sudden, what gets popular right after that and then surpasses it is basically that look, just with that kind of grunge sort of music. Mm-hmm. And it helped bridge that. Okay, this is acceptable. Now look at these guys.
Well, and kind of in that same wheelhouse. It's funny to me is these bands we're talking about, right or wrong, some people still think of them as hair metal bands. But at this time, a lot of that poofy hair stuff was sort of dying out. I mean, yeah, you had some guys that still had their poodle doos, but it wasn't like 86 and 87 when everybody was glammed out and were using 6 cases of hairspray to go on stage every night.
Yeah, it definitely was. They were starting to tone it down a notch. Yeah, absolutely. Overall, great. And did you have anything else on that?
No, I'm good. I'm all Tesla'd out.
Okay.
No, it's kind of funny too because you don't wash your hair. It went from having too much hairspray to not washing your hair at all.
Like with the grunge scene, yeah.
It's like we worked for 45 minutes to get our hair this way to 5 years later is we don't even want to work on our hair. I haven't showered in 17 days, so this is what you get.
Yeah, exactly. So I
think you're up, though, Scott.
I'm going to segue into one of the bands that Tim just mentioned, Great White. This is Twice Shy. Now, I think Great White always held a special spot for me because they were one of the first bands that I ever saw live. They opened up for Judas Priest in the first concert that I ever went to. So I always kind of like, Great White. They're that band like we had talked about before too with another album. I think that they never quite made it to that next level. But I like there's a few songs on this album that are really, really good. House of Broken Love, Once Bitten, Twice Shy was, huge radio hit and got a lot of play.
Cover.
Another cover, right? They did a few. Missed a Bone was a good one. The groove on that one is pretty cool. I like the kind of I think it's funny that Tony Montana is the name of the bass guitar player, and I didn't realize that before. I never paid attention to all the band members other than I remember Jack Russell being the vocalist, but Tony Montana. So Scarface played with Great White for a while apparently. So you got. I know there's a couple other songs on here. I can't remember which one I liked a lot. I think it might have been the Angel song. Can't recall it now.
Yeah, that was on there. That was one of the singles to another ballad. Enough with the ballads.
Yeah.
Overall, good album in my opinion. House of Broken Love. I still have that in regular rotation on my iPod list. I just always like that blues sound that they did with that one. So, how about you guys?
I like this album not as much as Once Bitten, and make no mistake, I love Great White, but it annoyed me that they had to get big here with a cover song. That bothers me because they're talented. They can write cool songs, and Once Bitten, the previous album, shows that off. Mm-hmm. This album, they kind of fell into the patterns of the time where they had to do a cover song and some ballads, and it just, it didn't ever really sit that well with me. But it's good. They're fabulous live, and it's funny you mentioned House of Broken Love because, when I first got the tape back then and listened to it, I was like, here's one of these songs. But after seeing them perform that live on whatever award show they did it on, some MTV awards or something, and Jack Russell was absolutely on fire. He nailed every single note, and he just showed people this is how you sing. That's when I really came to appreciate that song. I was like, okay, yeah, you have to admit, that's a pretty darn cool song.
I like the blues guitar licks in it too.
Yeah, Mark Kendall is a really solid guitar player and very bluesy. He's got obviously bluesy undertones, which most heavy metal is based on bluesy overtones.
And these guys have shown it from the beginning too. They've had that blues, heavier on the blues side than some of the other bands that you might not be able to pick it out unless you're really listening for it. But these guys are obvious. They have that bluesy sound, carried over from, like you guys had talked about with how much they sound like Led Zeppelin. And then the whole tribute to Led Zeppelin and stuff, they had a very blues sound, and it's all born from the blues. I love the blues.
I also liked Audie Despro. I thought he's a really good drummer. So because I pay a lot of attention rhythm section wise, but they're very talented.
Well, as a bassist,
musicians.
You have to, right?
What's that?
As a bassist, you have to.
Well, you do, because that's the first key. When you hear a song, that's the first, you're keyed in on that whole thing,
right.
But I agree with Tim, excuse me, and that's why I originally said, cover song, like whisper that, because you tell anybody, like, oh yeah, Great White, what's that record they have? It's like, oh yeah, the song Once Bitten, Twice Shy, and then people start to sing it. It's probably got to be a huge karaoke song for people of our age that do karaoke. So I'm like, but there's 8 other songs on there, and some of them are really good. Like, did you even know that they had that? Like, more songs on it? Or did you just skip right to Once Bitten, Twice Shy and just play it on a loop, like in your car? Or, they do make other good music on this album.
Yeah.
So, and House of Broken Love, Angel Song, I don't even count that. I don't recognize it. As far as this record has 8 tracks on it. That's a spam track. It should be a hidden track. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. I'm with Tim. I just like, why just settle in? And I understand why, because it worked. It gets you popular. You got to put the ballad on there. You got to put the cover on there, and you know what I mean. Whatever. It's formulaic a little bit, but I mean, there's some good songs on here. House of Broken Love, like Mr. Bone. There's good songs. So,
it's funny you guys both mentioned Mr. Bone, which, it's funny. I was 18 when I was still kind of a kid. I thought, giggle, giggle, Mr. Bone. Gee, what's he singing about? But I thought really it was a dumb song until I saw him play it live. It is light years cooler live than on the album.
They're a really good live band. I've seen them 2 times as openers. I've seen them 2 times, and they're very, very, very good live. They're a little different live than the radio. I mean, you're right. It translates different. You hear a song on the CD or on the album, cassette, whatever you were listening to on then, but live it translates a little differently, and they're very, very, very talented live. But I think that they hit their niche perfectly. I think they're as popular as they should have been. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think there's a level up for Great White, like to be like that kind of, like Motley Crue was in '89. They're the biggest band in the world. I mean, As far as touring, and I don't think Great White was ever going to be that band. They hit their niche, they hit their stride, and they did exactly what they should do. Are they much more talented than bands that got more popular? Absolutely. They're very talented musicians, more so than some that probably didn't. But I think they found their niche, they liked what they did, and that's just where their ceiling is. Not that it's a bad thing. I just think it's nice when you figure out what you are and how you want to present yourself and how you want to be, and they hit that mark, and it's good. Later, obviously, some very bad things happened to them later, but for what they were, I do. But I haven't listened to a lot of this stuff unless it comes on satellite radio. They never really were like a favorite band of mine, but I certainly would listen to them. Except for Angel Song, I will not listen to that. I'm not a ballad.
Yeah,
I couldn't
remember
been a ballad fan.
I couldn't remember which other song that I actually liked, and that name just jumped out at me, and now I'm understanding why it jumped out, because it hit number 30 on the top 100. So it probably had some radio play that I remember, or that's way in the back of my head. So I don't even know. I can't remember what the song sounds like at this point.
It's very slow, very just give me a headache. Hang on.
So
cover art was great. I know Tim usually mentions the cover art sometimes. The cover art on this, I absolutely love the cover art on this. I think it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was eye-catching.
They had some interesting cover art. There was one with Jack Russell on a stretcher. He was. Oh, I can't remember which album it was, but it was.
It's the Recovery Live thing. It was kind of a hodgepodge. It was an EP.
You know which one I'm talking about? Or he's holding.
Yeah, and it actually has like 3 different covers, and they're all variations on what you're talking about.
Yeah, he's holding a package.
Yeah.
It's funny too. It's funny too that even in here, that the genre is listed as glam metal. Never really thought of Great White as glam metal, honestly.
Huh? That's funny, because I'm looking at their Wikipedia page, and it says hard rock heavy metal. It didn't say glam metal on that one.
Yeah, it says it on the one that I'm on.
Huh? Interesting. It does talk about the album itself. Yeah.
Not the band itself. The album itself.
I had no idea they've been around since 1977.
Well, they didn't put anything out until like 81 or 82, but
right.
But
they were together. That's amazing. So yeah.
Well, if they're together, if they're together for 10 years, or if they're together for 7 to 8 years, and then they put out an album that sells more than 1 million copies, that in music is an overnight success. Overnight, because you've never heard of them the day before. Like, there's a lot of bands that put 10 years of playing in clubs, and then had an album that hit, and you're like, oh my God, they must have just started, and look at this new great band, and like, no, not really. Like, they were literally playing in clubs 8 years ago. I mean, there's very few that are overnight successes, especially previous to now. Now you just get somebody who can sing and looks halfway different. You have a team of songwriters write them a song, they put it out in a month, and boom, you're an overnight success because they can capitalize on something. It didn't work that way a whole lot. I mean, maybe in the pop genre, but not in this.
So the Monkees are not real?
No, they are. They are, Scott. And Santa Claus also. Santa Claus is real.
The Monkees are not a real band.
I don't want to ruin it for you, man. I don't want to ruin it for you.
Sorry, I'm going way back on that one.
Yeah, and the Partridge Family too. They came up together on the mean streets of Malibu Beach.
the mean streets of Malibu Beach. Nice.
So what now?
So that's our third pick of each of us.
Right.
Did you guys want to throw any more out there? A couple others that you had in mind? I know Tim said he had like 6. Originally.
I got a lot more, man.
Really?
Yes.
All right. Well, look, I'm just gonna sit back, and if I hear anything that triggers a memory, I'll throw some my voice in there. But if you guys want to just go and geek out on a couple that I really don't know. Oh wait, hold on a second. Sorry, I'm getting an interruption here.
Oh, God.
Sorry, that was for you, Chris.
Oh, jeez. I just ate
I could not go through this show without talking about White Lion just for fun, just to mess with you.
At least it wasn't When the Children Cry.
Actually,
Good
I don't
Lord,
know if is that on. Yeah, that is on that album too.
Oh yeah, that's the. You make me sick.
You know, it's kind of fitting for today, these days. You know. So, all right. So Tim, you have some more. Sorry about that little interlude. I just had to mess with Chris a little bit.
I had a kind of a feeling that was coming anyway. So.
There's a couple of first albums that I remember that were like the artist like kind of first album that I started hearing about him. So I'm gonna be interested to hear if you actually mention them. So go ahead.
Well, throw one out. Throw one out there, Tim.
Yeah.
Just really, we won't spend a lot of time on them because but if you don't want to, but I'm just curious because I've got a few too that were sort of important to me and
okay.
I thought they were pretty good. Couple anyway.
Cool. Tim?
Okay, one of the things I wanted to bring up was how many cool debut albums came out this year. That was actually a topic I wanted to bring up, so we'll get to that in a second. But for bands where they weren't their debuts, hopefully you guys have heard of the band Lily and Axe. Their second album, Love and War, came out this year, and you talk about cover art. Whew, look it up. And Steve Blaze used to go by Stevie Blaze, then it's Steve Blaze. He is one of the all-time underrated songwriter, lead guitarist, guitar players. This guy is just amazing, and it's funny because their first couple of albums definitely came out during this period, the hair metal glam period or whatever, but they are so much more sophisticated than like a lot of the bands they get lumped in with. They do have some songs about chicks because, you kind of had to unless you were like a true metal band, which they weren't. But their songs are just a lot deeper. They're more about relationships and things. It's not just partying all the time. But they can be fun. They can be serious. He has some neoclassical tendencies where he's right up there with Yngwie Malmsteen. Their songwriting is just, it's not always conventional, too. There'll be cool little fills and breaks and pauses and things where you won't expect them. It's interesting to listen to. They had a video off this album. Their video was for a song called Show a Little Love, which was a great video to, the hallmarks of the era. They had the video babe and everything. But another band, in my opinion, that got overlooked, but my college buddies and I absolutely love this band. Even our girlfriends love this band. Like, this was the universal band that we all liked, and with great reason. They're still kicking. I think they're putting out like 2 albums this year in 2017. So, Lily and Axe. I actually had one guy tell me that he wrote them off just because the name was like a spoof on Molly Hatchet. Lily and Axe, Molly Hatchet. And I was like, okay, you got to at least listen to them before you can just write them off like that. So if you've ever thought Lily and Axe was a goofy band name, please listen to the music because I almost guarantee you'll like it.
Well, it's almost as bad as Cinderella or Snow White.
So have you guys heard of Lily and Axe?
I never have. I've heard the name, but I don't think I've ever heard a song. I couldn't name a song. I couldn't tell you, that's Lily and Axe if I heard a song came on the radio. But
I don't remember them at all. I mean, no, I remember hearing the name, but I can't remember any songs that they did. I might recognize them if I heard a song, if they had anything. Like you said, a video. If they had a video in rotation on like Headbangers Ball or something, I probably would have seen it because I remember watching that a lot.
Well, then homework is to look up the video for Show a Little Love. You'll like it. All right, another one I got is the Danish band, DAD. Anybody remember them? It stood for Disneyland After Dark, but they couldn't use that name, obviously, so they shortened it to DAD. They had a couple albums out. They had a couple albums out, but then they got their deal with Warner Brothers, and so this wasn't really their debut, but it was the first time anybody in America heard of them. And the album was called No Fuel Left for the Pilgrims, and they had a video for the song "Sleeping My Day Away" that is like one of the catchiest
that's a great song.
songs.
I love that song.
The whole album, it's just 12 songs. They're short, they're punchy, they're sort of like AC/DC in a way, but it's hard to describe. They have more of like an earthy vibe. I don't know if that's the right word, but they have the really interesting, deep, twangy guitar tone that isn't for everyone. But I love it. I can listen to this album start to finish at pretty much the drop of a hat. And the lyrics are really clever. They're funny. if you look up any videos of them performing live over the years, they put on a great stage show, a lot of goofy pyrotechnics, and their bass player is known for playing 2 and 3 string basses because supposedly he realized that that's all he ever used, so that's all he ever needed on his guitars. It's kind of a joke, but it's funny. And another band, D80, they've got 1 million albums out. Lineup's been relatively stable, but they had a little taste of fame right around this time frame, and then kind of disappeared from the American fans landscape, I think, and then they just stayed in Europe and kept churning out albums for the last 25 years or whatever it's been. So I don't know if you guys remember them, but that's another underrated band that I love.
That one song, but I didn't know it was that band. But that's cool. That name is awesome. Obviously, you're not going to put that on an album cover. Right. Disney After Dark. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I can't even find them. DAD, like D.A.A or D.
If you're looking on Wikipedia, it's D-A-D.
Okay.
And that's another thing that's funny is their name, the abbreviation sort of changed over the years. Sometimes there were periods. Sometimes they were stars. Sometimes they were asterisks. Sometimes they're dashes. It's, I think that's funny. It probably pisses people off who can't Google them easily, but
yeah,
they are out there. And then I got one more random one.
All right.
The German metal band. This is true metal. The band's called Running Wild, named after the old Judas Priest song. I don't remember. They've had a bunch of albums out before this, but on Noise Records, they released Death or Glory, which a lot of people who like this band think is probably their best album. And they're Iron Maiden inspired. They sing about historical things, battles and stuff, and they sort of adopted the pirate metal vibe at some point where they sang about pirates and looting and rum and stuff, and they managed to do it. Yeah, of course it's a little cheesy, a little hokey. They dud it up in the leather and studs thing. It's a little Manowar-ish, but they pull it off, and they're just jamming fat. It's not like thrash, but it's good up-tempo, solid heavy metal. It is not glam. It is not blues-based. There's no ballads. I mean, it's throwing horns kind of metal. It's good stuff.
Is this like Sword-like or Crimson?
No. They're not progressive like Crimson Glory. You'll never mistake the two singers for each other, because the guy's name in Running Wild is Rockin' Rolf, and his last name is Kasparic. I guess that didn't roll off the tongue, so he went with Rockin' Rolf. He's got kind of a grittier metal voice that, his songs are a little longer than Sword. They actually do some instrumentals. They're in the same, if you like Priest and sure, Sword, Maiden, those kind of bands, I think that you'll find a lot to like in Running Wild's catalog. They've put out a ton of albums, and they're all pretty solid, except in recent years they reunited a little bit and tried to recapture the vibe, and didn't really do it. But their 80s and 90s heyday, I mean, these guys really, really planted the flag for true heavy metal and just kept rocking.
Their Wikipedia page is really interesting. They got a graph chart or something that shows their different band members and who played what.
Oh yeah, it's been 1,000. It's been 1,000.
Yeah, a lot of people in this band.
Yeah. So I don't know, Chris, did you want to mention, because I wanted to kind of talk about debuts too, so I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I just got a couple of bands that I like, albums in any way, but and I won't go too deep in them. But the first one was I was The Cult, Sonic Temple. I love that album. I like The Cult. I like Ian Astbury. He has a fantastic voice. Obviously, there were a couple of songs on there that had some radio play. I don't know if they went to charts or not like that, but I'm pretty sure Firewoman did. And but it's just a band that I always, it's just a band I always liked. And keeping in the theme of not only the band but who's behind it, was that that Bob Rock produced this. So kind of what helped change their style a little bit. Bob Rock got them a little bit more focused, a little bit more like, okay, we can write songs. We don't have to be all over the place. Let's have some focus in what we're writing. And so again, no coincidence that there's always a tweak behind. I think a lot of times the producers and engineers go very much unnoticed in how much they can focus a band on a particular direction and a sound, and to help kind of hone that. Because most as musicians, you just write, and this is what I want, and this is what I have, and just put it on tape, But that producer engineer to sort of guide some of that. And the really, really good ones do a lot of work, and they're noticed because they're good, and they make things very different. Another one is another favorite band of mine from that time was excuse me, Metal Church. I always liked Metal Church. I thought they're not underrated because their talent and their songwriting ability got them where it got them. But one of my favorite bands, a little under the radar as far as that thrash sound, and they're always kind of the perennial opener. Metal Church is always that first band that plays, and then eventually they got to be the second band that plays, because you remember at one time in our time period of this, a lot of these bands would tour in threes, like an opener, a middle band, and then the headliner. So it was cool that Metal Church, so like for bands, you'd be that first band that gets 40 minutes on stage to get to be the second band that might get close to an hour. Maybe we get an hour, And so that was always a pretty favorite band of mine. And I've got one more, but I'll let you guys, if you have any input on those two real quick. Probably more so maybe the Cult than Metal Church.
I'm the opposite. I know a lot more about Metal Church than I do the Cult, although Firewoman was a great song, and that was the song that brought the Cult to my attention. But yeah, no, I've got a handful of Metal Church albums. I got the first couple on vinyl. Total respect for these guys, too. Watch the Children Pray was, to me, that's still an example of how you properly do a mid-tempo heavy metal song. That's just awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, Metal Church, again, one of my favorites. And it's kind of in my genre a little bit, but that it definitely very, very good band.
I'm diligently making notes on all these bands that I don't.
And the Cult, like you said, Firewoman was, that was that Bob Rock focus and his ability to get something out of it. I would love to hear what the Cult's version of that song was before they went, because there's always a demo, there's always that 4-track recorder hotel room version, and then what it becomes. I'm always curious as to what the change was that Bob Rock said, okay, I like that, but let's focus on, maybe we could do this a little different, maybe we could change the tempo here. It's all those little subtle suggestions that end up kind of creating that, but it definitely was probably the song that everybody heard to say, oh, who's this band over here? Who's this Cult band?
Yeah, which is kind of funny because I remember hearing, I knew of them several albums before, and that's a great song, Firewoman, and Sweet Soul Sister's another good one on there. It got a lot of play. Firewoman, I could swear that was actually used on some kind of commercial. Maybe... No, is it on a Doctor Who album or Doctor Who episode? Apparently, I thought it was in a commercial or something. I could swear it was like a Cadillac or something like that.
I've got one more real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so this one, but I had a very good friend who was from Olympia, Washington, and he had moved, and I met him after high school, and he was a big into music and not the same type of music. So I kind of introduced him to thrash, and he sort of introduced me to Soundgarden, which Louder Than Love. And it really was a cool album for me. It was Soundgarden is a little heavier than the rest of what eventually came out, except maybe for Alice in Chains got a little heavier. But I've always had a huge amount of respect for Chris Cornell. huge amount of respect. I think he's an unbelievably talented musician, songwriter, poet, and generally very cool guy. Had the chance to meet him on a couple of occasions, and very, very cool. Still to this day touring like on those little one-man band kind of spoken word / acoustic music little sets that he was doing before. But this actually is a really cool album. More than likely, I don't know if you maybe not even heard of a single song on this whole album, but it's really, really cool. It's really good. And also, notwithstanding the fact that I like to say this, but Terry Date was the producer who has done everybody from Sir Mix-a-Lot to Pantera to everything. The guy is an unbelievably talented producer / engineer. And I think he started to get out of Soundgarden a little more. Ultra Mega OK, which was before this, was very unfocused. And just a really cool album. What it would turn out to be a great band. Everything after this was one of my favorite lyrics of any song ever written, any genre, came from Chris Cornell and Soundgarden. And it was, I'm looking California, but I'm feeling Minnesota.
Yeah.
I was like, that is such a
song,
cool,
yeah.
That is such a cool lyric.
Was
And
that Wicked,
maybe
Wicked Garden?
No, that was
Outshined.
Outshined. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Outshined. I was trying to think of the name of the song, but that was Outshined.
Yeah.
It's just like that whole paragraph that he sang right there.
Oh, that's a
but
great
that
song.
last part is just like, that's just, I still say that from now and then. You know, how you doing? I'm like, I'm looking California, but feeling Minnesota. It just like, it's just cool, man. It,
Yeah.
from a lyricist musician point, I was like, why didn't I write that? You know? But anyway, just one of my favorite bands later, but I was introduced to them at this time period and did kind of really fall in love with their music and their style, and just thought they were very cool.
Yeah, I know one song off this album, and that's "Hands All Over," and that was kind of, it was. I guess it probably had radio play. It's one of the ones that are actually highlighted in the list of songs. But I really started to like Soundgarden as the '90s went on, and I've just always liked Chris Cornell's vocals. Something about his voice, I just dig it. And him going on to Audioslave. Audioslave became one of my favorite bands too in the 2000s. They just had a good sound together between them and Rage Against Chris Cornell and Rage Against the Machine. Basically, had a really kind of a unique sound, and I just dug them. So I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this whole album. I've never heard the whole album from this their debut, and I'm guessing that this is going to be a good segue into what Tim wanted to talk about with debut albums, right?
Yeah, because I got nothing to say about Soundgarden. Not a fan. I used to get no. I used to get so annoyed seeing that Kim Thale guy on the cover of all the guitar magazines, and I was like, no, take him off and put George Lynch on the cover of the guitar magazine, or put Yngwie Malmsteen on the cover, Eddie Van Halen on the cover of the guitar magazine. Not
Tim,
that guy.
You know they just write what's popular at the moment. But I get your point. I totally get your point.
But real quick, maybe this will get edited out, maybe it won't. But since we're talking about brilliant lyrics, I'm going to go back to the DAD album. They have a song called Siamese Twin, and the opening lyric is, "She's two of a kind, and she's mine, all mine. I tell you I love her. She's a 6-hole golf course. Ooh, 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 I need her." That is brilliant.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I want to print that out and frame it.
Not exactly politically correct, but it's funny.
No, that is funny though.
All right,
Excuse me.
Yeah, one to mention is, looking through this list, I picked out my favorites. I want to talk about them, but then there was all these other ones. I'm like, wow, this is a first album. This is a first album. This is it's like, I set all these aside. a lot of cool new bands debut. Now, like Chris was saying before, I'm sure some of these bands have been slugging it out for a while, but this is when their first albums came out. It was a big year.
Right.
Annihilator, a Canadian thrash band. Love these guys. Their album Alice in Hell came out this year. And that song, Alice in Hell, they had a video for. Jeff Waters, the guitar player, he is Annihilator. It's him and whoever's with him. That's who Annihilator is. But he is one of the best rhythm guitar players. He, I think at one point was courted, Dave Mustaine wanted him to join Megadeth. It never worked out for whatever reasons, but Annihilator is one of those bands that's put out 1 million albums and nobody in the mainstream really knows about them, but brilliant heavy metal band. Dream Theater's debut came out this year.
I'm glad you brought that one up. That's good.
Yeah, I always get the name wrong because they released something later with a similar name, but this is When Dream and Day Unite with their original singer. And it's cool. There's an instrumental on here called I guess you pronounce it Yitzy Jam. I don't know, but it's Majesty backwards because that was what their name used to be before they changed it to Dream Theater. But I used to listen to that song endlessly because the whole prog metal thing, this was my introduction. This was my gateway drug into prog metal was this album. And that song in particular, even though it's just an instrumental, it was just so cool. The odd time signatures and everything. Just, I love these guys for a period of time. And then I just kind of got tired of the math metal stuff, Still totally respect them. They're still putting out albums. They're fabulous live. I've seen them a bunch of times. But I come and go with these guys. 1 minute I'm just all about Dream Theater, and the next minute I'm like, I need a 3-minute song. I don't need an 8-minute epic right now.
They are good. They have a tendency to go a little long in their songs. But, and that's kind of one of the reasons I don't think they made it as big as they do as some of the other bands because of that, Like Metallica was an anomaly because they were able to put out long songs and still get the popularity where other bands not so much. 3 minutes was like the attention span of most people. So, you can't go wrong with John Sorry, can't say his name. I still can't say it. Gentlemen, would you mind saying it for me?
John Petrucci.
Petrucci, thank you. I know the name well. It wouldn't come out. So that guy's amazing on guitar.
Oh, yeah.
And
everybody in this band is just a stupid, awesome virtuoso at their instrument.
Oh yeah, these guys are hardcore talent, and it shows in their music. I mean. Mm-hmm. It's precise. Everything is very, like you said, math. Did you call it math metal?
Yeah, I sort of joke. I mean, it's not. There's a whole other.
No, I get it. No, I totally get it. It's very precise and very. It's orchestrated. There's nothing that's just kind of thrown together at all by these guys. These guys are very serious.
A lot of that comes from either music school. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of these bands actually meet in music school, and or they were very sound, talented session musicians or studio musicians that just kind of got together, and that's why they're so technically sound. A lot of these bands like that, it's just technically sound, but the difference in that is you can be technically sound, but at least have some like personal flavor too. That's like that. And he did. Like he's just incredible, absolutely incredible. So I'm hoping you're going to mention Enough's, Tim, because it was their debut album too.
I'm getting there. The next one I want to bring up though is Dangerous Toys with Jason McMaster on lead vocals. They came out of Texas. It was interesting because he got his first cup of coffee with a math metal band called Watchtower down in Texas, which also had a stupidly amazing guitar player named Billy White, who, Watchtower, they were a cult band. Jason McMaster left. He ended up in Dangerous Toys, which had some measure of success, and Billy White went on to join Don Dokken's solo band for a year or two. But Dangerous Toys, it's one of my favorite bands from that era. He was one of the first rock stars that I ever met, actually, was Jason at it was after the Operation Rock and Roll tour had kind of fizzled out in like around 91. It was Judas Priest and Alice Cooper, Motorhead, Metal Church, a bunch of bands, Dangerous Toys. And then they had like a second leg of it where it was only 3 bands. It was just Priest, Alice Cooper, and Dangerous Toys. And it was cool because after their set, he was just out there hanging around, just meeting people. And I had never seen at that point like a big rock star who was on MTV and who had videos and stuff, just, you know, walking around shaking hands with the fans after a show. I thought that was pretty cool. And I actually got to be pretty good friends with Jason over the years. And I interviewed him a bunch of times. And my buddies and I actually made a music video for one of their songs off one of their later albums. And he's just a cool guy. He's in 1.5 million bands. But this first Dangerous Toys album, the song Scared is one of the all-time classics of the 80s. And it's cool because it's like written about Alice Cooper. It's like a tribute to Alice Cooper and all the cool things that Alice Cooper had done throughout his career. And it's a brilliant song. It's weird because they have kind of like a Texas hillbilly metal vibe in places. And then the song Scared is just so well written and polished and different and cool that it's like, it's kind of almost hard to believe it's the same band. But, you know, they had some videos, they had some success. I don't know what you guys think about Dangerous Toys, but they were another band that was really, really, really good live, and, you know, better live than on the albums, I would say.
Yeah, I remember the name. I know that occasionally on what is it, Hair Nation on satellite radio, I see them. You know, their name will pop up with like probably Teasin' Pleasin', that song.
Yeah,
That was probably the one that I know most of. I don't know the one Scared. I might know it if I heard it.
Oh my God.
I might know it if I heard it, but I'll have to look it up. You guys have given me a lot of freaking homework this week, man. And that's something I know this is our final year, but we're going to have to go back and look at some of these ones that were a little bit more obscure or something. Some way that I can follow up with my homework assignments. Because this is, I have 5 bands that I have to look up now already. So, and then specific songs occasionally here and there. So we're gonna have to do some kind of follow up for this. Anyway,
trying to get through this. Moving on, Extreme. I think we talked about Extreme once before. Their debut was cool. They had won a contest on MTV. I forgot what was the contest called, the Basement Tapes or something. But that's, I think, was their first claim to fame was that. But then this debut album, there's some great stuff on here, and it shows that Nuno Bettencourt was the hotshot young guitarist of the day, and it's funny because he just looks completely stoned out of his mind on the album cover, but he fantastic player. And there's like a pretty decent Van Halen vibe on some of the stuff. They got some funk metalness to them.
Surprise!
And a really cool song to just sample real quick is "Play With Me." The song at the end. It's not, you think "Play With Me" from an 80s metal band, you kind of think you know what the lyrics are about. It's not what you think it is, and it's awesome. So look that one up too. But okay. Extreme. Yes, Enough's Enough, Chris. I know that's for you, but actually that was one of the shout-outs. One of my friends at work wanted me to bring up a couple for shout-outs, and Enough's Enough was one of them. How do you feel about Enough's Enough's debut album?
Oh, I hate it. I never liked this band. God, it was like the optimum of hair bands. Like, I mean, their hair and the neon and the
neon,
stuff.
Dude. The neon was.
God, it was almost unwatchable. Like,
I would have to just. I'll have to do
totally tongue in cheek that I actually mentioned them. But
I know.
I'm gonna say
just weird. Yeah.
I'm gonna disagree with you, Chris. They weren't almost unwatchable.
They were unwatchable.
They were. And to me, there was something about. Hold on, I gotta look up. I gotta see if it's that one song is on this album. No, what's the album on this? Or wait, sorry. Let me look it up. Hold on. I'm getting there. That's weird.
Yeah, I mean, like everybody did hear him. "Fly High, Michelle." I mean,
yeah, that's the song.
That's the
new thing.
Like, yeah, the new thing.
Thing.
That's right. That's the one.
That one drove me nuts. There was something. Like there was like something missing. I'm not a musician, so I don't know what it was, but there was something like like a bridge or something. I don't know. There was something missing in that song that it just drove me nuts. It was like the same sound over, and it seemed like it just never ended. That little, it just drove me nuts. So after hearing that one song, I never listened to him again. I couldn't do it.
It's
and
funny
then
because
the neon thing too.
Being from Chicago,
I know.
They were all over the place here.
Know.
They played all, and they've got 1.5 million albums,
mm-hmm.
and they have that big claim to fame is that David Letterman loved them. They were his favorite band for a period of time. They have some extremely dedicated fans who just
mm-hmm.
love them. They're still putting out albums to this day, and I don't know. I tried to like them. I'd seen them live a couple times. They were better live. They were heavier sounding live, but yeah, I never saw it. They never clicked for me.
Okay, good. I'm not alone. Then we got.
Yeah. And then we have.
That's unanimous. It seems like for the three of us here, they weren't really that great. They have a great following, but apparently. So anyway,
we have this self-titled debut from Badlands, which was Jakey Lee's first band after he left Ozzy's band, and. Eric Singer, the drummer, he's been kind of well-traveled at that point, but since then he's played with everybody. Great drummer. And the singer, Ray Gillen, one of my all-time favorite singers, it's such a shame that his discography is so limited, though, because unfortunately he died way too young. But he had just come out of a stint where he was in Black Sabbath for a little while. Unfortunately, didn't record anything with Black Sabbath. Then he was also sort of temporarily teamed up with John Sykes, and that could have been something cool, but it fell through. And then Gillen ended up joining up with Jakey Lee with Badlands, which is another. They're not. I don't know. They're kind of like Tesla in a way, in that they're more like this rootsy, straightforward rock, but they don't really sound like Tesla. But they fit together, like that tour I was mentioning earlier. But just some good, straightforward. Hard rock and metal, a strong blues bass, and Ray Gillen's voice is just awesome. So, Chris, I heard you nodding, but that's ridiculous. I heard you agreeing. So you have thoughts on Ray Gillen, Badland?
I have thoughts on Badland. I mean, Ray Gillen is fantastic. Eric Singer, great drummer. I have a thing for Jakey Lee. Like, I think that he is... It's one of my favorite guitar players ever, in any genre, metal, hard rock, whatever you say. It's interesting because think about it from like a sought after instrument. Like, you would think that like, I wanted a replica, or I would always like to play a guitar like Eddie Van Halen did, or a Les Paul. Do you know what at one point the most sought after guitar was, and part because of who made it, but part because that Jakey Lee played it and got tone and sound out of it that shouldn't have come out of it, but it did because it was Jakey Lee. And that was a single bridge pickup Strat head Charvel, which was Wayne Charvel, which would be Charvel Jackson, which later would be Jackson Guitars and all that stuff. But he made USA models in California, all handmade, and Jakey Lee played it, and it's he didn't play like that real pointy Jackson kind of, headstock on the guitar that looked like he could poke somebody with it and probably cut a vein or something like that. He played the most simplistic single bridge pickup Strat head, which had a Stratocaster headstock on it at the end of the guitar, and just got unbelievable, phenomenal sound. Wayne Charvel made very few of those guitars. Very, very few. And they are unbelievably collectible if you ever find one. A real USA handmade Charvel Strat head. And Jakey Lee could get tone and volume out of this guitar with a single little pickup that nobody on earth should ever have been able to get. And he unbelievable guitar player. I love Badlands, the band. I love the whole setup that they had. Just kind of clicked. Came and went probably quicker than I really wanted them to, but yeah, just unbelievable band.
So I recall one of our first conversations between the three of us, you guys brought up Badlands, and Tim, you sent me a link to the YouTube, and I listened to the album, and I remember the band, and this is one of my first homework assignments, I think, that I could call it a homework assignment, and I absolutely love this album. So that's glad that you brought it back up again too. So they were amazing. They really were a talented band, and
Yeah, they are. They had tremendous talent. I mean, all the way around from top to bottom. And I always had a big fan of Jake E. Lee. I thought his work with previously with I think he bridged that gap between Randy Rhoads and where I just like. Is just super talented. I always got a soft spot for Jake E. Lee. So anybody that says anything bad about Jake E. Lee can just come right here and we'll fight right in the street. Yeah, I always thought he was a very didn't get the press or anything that I really think he should have gotten. I think he's unbelievably talented. But that band as a whole it was a band that clicked musically, but could not coexist personally. That was never a band that was going to coexist personally. That was a dumpster fire if there ever was one. I mean, like on stage, breaking up, fighting while, between songs. It was never a band that was going to last. But the music that they did make, and maybe some of it was because of that friction. Like if they did this on stage, could you imagine what 6 months in the studio would have been like? Like with these guys, I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of punches thrown and stuff like that. But yeah, just one very quick flash left behind some tremendous music, and just a shame that couldn't have gone on for a lot longer.
I'm gonna have to look this one back up again.
Yeah, dude, no, definitely.
Yeah.
That was another one that my buddy Brad had mentioned, and then the last one he had brought up that was also a debut was Mr. Big, self-titled. I think we talked about Mr. Big before, how, I really like this song, Addicted to That Rush.
Oh, yeah.
But
it's a great song.
I expected and wanted so much more from the Mr. Big album because of the talent involved.
Yes.
And they definitely... They set aside their virtuoso musicianship abilities and went for songwriting, which I get that because that's what sells albums and enabled them to go on tour, and then they could be cool and heavy and everything live. But just the album itself, it's good, of course, because of the pedigree of who's involved, but I'm still a little disappointed with it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll agree with you on this, and I was really hopeful for them also. Because I had this friend of mine. I lived in California during my high school years, and towards the end, right before I moved here, or moved to Chicago area, not here, Florida. Right before I moved to Chicago, I would talk with this one guy every time I came to visit, and we always talked about like the new and up and coming bands. And I was really talking up Mr. Big because I had heard Addicted to That Rush. I'm like, this is going to be an amazing, this is going to be awesome. These guys are going to be really good, and you thought with the lineup, like you said, it had really big potential, and it just never really didn't do as well. And then they had the next album, I think it was, that ballad song. Oh,
Green Tinted 60s Mind.
Oh, that one too.
To be with you.
To be with you, yeah.
Yeah.
That was huge.
Yeah, it was huge. It was a great song. From a songwriting perspective, it was almost perfection, but it's like, I don't need to hear it 80,000 times.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of it. It would have, I could have been done without it. Addicted to That Rush is still in my lineup for my MP3s. So I listen to that every once in a while. It's a great song. Billy Sheehan, he had Billy Sheehan on the bass. There you go. Coming from David Lee Roth and previous
Talus.
To that, Talus, yeah. So you really had a lot of high expectations for this band, and it just kind of didn't happen. So it's unfortunate, but good album, good pick for a debut though.
And then Chris, yeah.
No, I was just gonna say very talented lineup. Very talented lineup. I wasn't a big fan of the songs. I never really. I mean, I knew Billy Sheehan was obviously, and and Paul Gilbert, but I'm a moderate fan. I think they kind of went a little bit more. It's funny because Billy Sheehan, coming from what a mess that whole David Lee Roth experience must have been.
Talk about a dumpster fire.
Yeah, talk about dumpster fire. To this, but literally, like to said, putting aside that virtuoso-ness and everything else that made them popular what they are, it's really just settling back and playing a song as a band instead of having to say, well, look at me, the bass player, look at me, the guitar player. When do I get my solo run in this song and show what I can do? And so it was more of just settling in and being a band. So for that aspect of it, there's a lot of ego in that room to have to put that aside. And it did click because they did write some very, very good songs. I mean, as far as the songwriting, vocally, that kind of stuff wasn't my personal favorite type of music or genre of music, but definitely being able to set all that aside and get in and play as a band. And sometimes for people who are virtuoso musicians, that's difficult to do, to sit back and say, okay, I'm not the focus here. I'm just going to lay down some tracks, or I'm going to play my part, and that's it. It's, when you've been to the top of that mountain, like a lot of those guys had, to come back down and just say, we're just going to be a core, almost nameless people. Like, I'm not Billy Sheehan anymore. I'm Billy Franklin, just halfway decent bass player. I'm just going to settle in and play some bass lines in this song. It's really cool that they did that.
Any other debuts? Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. We're still rolling here. There's this one's a little bit borderline, but the band Shotgun Messiah, they from Sweden. They actually had debuted the year before. Their previous name was Kingpin. You want to talk about neon? Google some old Kingpin press photos and your eyes will explode. But they signed to Relativity Records in the U.S., changed their name to Shotgun Messiah. I think they remixed and re-released the album. So again, from your average American metalhead fan standpoint, 2009 was their debut, self-titled. And it's funny because you look at these guys and you think, oh my God, 1986 never ended. They have the big hair, the kind of the glam silliness. But then even with the singer on this first album, his name is Zinny J. Zahn. It's like, okay, that's your real name. And you listen to him and it's so glammy. It's just so glammy. But then musically speaking, though, that's when you realize these guys really had it, especially the guitar player, Harry Cody. He has an instrumental on here called The Explorer. It's awesome. You're like, wow, dude, you should do more of that. And these guys, they changed so much. They put out 3 albums. They had lineup changes, whatever. Harry Cody was the first musician that I ever interviewed for my old e-zine, and he was the coolest guy. And oh my God, it's like somewhere in an alternate universe, this guy is like a god because he deserves to be. He was that good of a guitar player. And like, I don't know, this album went almost gold. I guess it almost went gold in the U.S., but nobody knows about Shotgun Messiah anymore. It's just a crying shame because they had it, but didn't click. They had problems, lineup changes, et cetera, and I don't know. You guys ever even heard of them?
I've heard of them. I remember the
Shotgun
name.
Messiah. Yeah, I have.
Okay, all right, good.
I'm gonna have to go back and revisit though on that one because I can't remember any of the songs.
The instrumental, The Explorer, is really cool. There's a song called Don't Care About Nothing. That's awesome. I'm Your Love is really good. They actually had a rap glam rock song.
That'll be interesting. Okay.
Called Shout It Out. That was a little odd, but they had different guys singing in it. It was kind of like Anthrax's I'm the Man in a way. It was like a silly rock rap type of thing. And then we have the last one I want to bring up debut-wise was Blue Murder, the self-titled release from what John Sykes' band ended up being when he didn't continue working with Ray Gillen. John Sykes just said, well, I'll sing. I'll play guitar and sing, damn it. I'm just that good. And he's got Tony Franklin on bass and Carmine Appice on drums. And probably remember the video for the song Valley of the Kings. That was one of the cooler videos from the era. These guys had a really thick, bluesy sound, a cool groove. They could never really keep it together, though. I think they did, one more studio album and then a live album, but that was another one that is almost a super group, kind of like Mr. Big. I think a lot of people had real high expectations for Blue Murder, with John Sykes coming out of the couple of Whitesnake albums that he had such a big hand in that everybody loved, And Blue Murder was good. It was really, but it wasn't like awesome, And I don't know. I don't want to say it was disappointing, but it kind of was hoping for a little more. But there are some really cool songs on the Blue Murder album.
Yeah, I remember the band too. Didn't they have a song called Blue Murder? Is that what you said? Did you say that?
They did, yeah.
And it was on their debut. I'm guessing it was on that album.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was.
Yeah.
But
I see
the
that
video
on
they had.
I remember I see that on that head hair band, Hair Nation, on satellite every once in a while. Come up too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Carmine Appice, drummer. I haven't heard that name in a long time.
That's funny. We could do a whole episode on him and his brother, Vinny Appice. And that's how they each pronounce their last name differently.
Yeah.
Vinny, of course, was in, Dio's band, and he was in Black Sabbath, and he's done a bunch of stuff. But yeah, he goes by Vinny Appice, and Carmine goes by Carmine Appice.
Yep. Yeah, that's just a name I have. I mean, that guy's played with and for and around everyone in his whole career. Amazing drummer, and he's been everywhere, every different kind of music. Like, I mean,
God.
Everything.
Yeah, I mean, he played with Rod Stewart, for crying out loud.
That's what I mean. He was Nugent, Stewart. I mean, he played with Ozzy. He played with. He did some stuff with Kiss, I think, or one of the members of Kiss. Did he play something with Paul Stanley at one point? Like, the guy's been everywhere. Everywhere. If you look him up, it just I'm sure his list of bands he's played with is, probably a half a page long or something like that. Unbelievable.
Hey, I did think of one more real quick. Do you guys remember the old record and tape clubs back in the old days?
Oh, Columbia?
Yeah, you
Columbia House?
Yeah, Columbia House.
10 tapes for a penny and all that.
Yeah.
You remember how when you were in those clubs, they would send you the pick of the month, and if you didn't return it in time, you get stuck with it and you have to pay for it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you get stuck with?
Well, I actually am very happy about this, but there was a band called Shark Island.
Okay.
And they were an LA band. If you look them up, there's a lot of interesting history with those guys, because supposedly Axl Rose stole all his stage moves from Richard Black, who was the frontman of Shark Island. But their first real album, Law of the Order, came out in '89, and that was one of these monthly picks, and it looked interesting to me. They looked like a sophisticated thinking man's metal kind of band, and I remember a buddy of mine was at my house when I got it in the mail. We threw it in the stereo, let's check this out. And it was really cool. The guy's kind of got a bit of a Don Dokken vibe at times vocally, but it's another band where they're not exactly what you'd expect from a band of the era. A lot of their lyrics were really clever and cool. And at that time, we all have girlfriends. We get dumped by girls, and you go through your phases where you're kind of like anti-woman for a little while. They had a couple cool songs that really fit that, frame of mind you might have been in. And they had a really, really interesting cover of Fleetwood Mac's song, The Chain.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know, these guys that came out of nowhere. I'd never heard of them before, and they ended up being some of the guys were part of the Contraband supergroup a couple of years later with Michael Schenker and Sherry Peterson from Vixen and Bobby Blotzer from Rat.
Wow.
They were an LA band that, I guess if you lived in LA, you knew who Shark Island was, but if you lived 2 miles outside of LA, you'd never heard of them, and
right.
I think looks like one of their songs was co-written by Dave Sabo from Skid Row. So they had some names involved. Shark Island. Check them out. Wouldn't surprise me at all if you'd never heard of them. But it's a pretty cool album.
I'm gonna close out my part of saying, or at least interject. There's two things that happened in 1989 revolving around heavy metal. One was a really cool moment and a really cool thing. One is something I'm still bitter about today, to this day. I will never get over it. And the good part was there was the Moscow Music Peace Festival, which obviously being in, of our time period, like that was a big moment in history, the wall coming down, being, with all that. So there's 5 or 6 bands that went over. I think Skid Row, Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, like that kind of size bands played that Moscow Music Peace Festival. I remember seeing portions of it like on MTV and stuff like that. And that was a musically and politically kind of things sort of merged there, and it became, something pretty cool. And after all that, obviously all the animosity of the two countries and nuclear wise for 40 years, Cold War ending, but I thought that was kind of cool. The other part that I am still bitter about to this day is in 1989, the Grammys finally decided to introduce a heavy metal category. And they decided it would be a wonderful thing to give that first award.
Hold on, you're breaking up. Can you
sorry.
back up a little bit?
You're turning into Mr. Robot.
Yeah, you sound like a robot.
Turning into Mr. Robot.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that better?
No.
Nope.
Did you move?
No.
Oh, wow.
No.
Yeah,
you guys were doing it before.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. It sounds better now.
Yeah.
Better now?
Chris, I was only hearing you get digitized. I was never hearing Scott sound digitized.
Oh, I heard it a little bit. But in any case,
okay. You're much better now. So suddenly you're clear.
Better now. Okay.
Okay.
But instead of giving it to Metallica for And Justice for All, which history would show is an incredible album, they decided to give that very first heavy metal award to Jethro Tull.
Because he epitomizes heavy metal.
Totally.
No, I remember how much of a controversy that was, and I think we brushed on this a little bit in a previous show. And it's terrible that happened, because really, if you think about heavy metal, who's one of the first bands that everybody's going to say is Metallica, not Jethro Tull.
Even people who don't listen to heavy metal say Metallica.
Oh yeah. They're not going to say Jethro Tull. Jethro Tull is classic rock, if it falls into that category. I mean, I like Jethro Tull. Don't get me wrong. The one-legged or flutist or whatever they call him. Now I know it wasn't his name, was it? That wasn't the.
No, his name is Ian Anderson.
The band was Jethro Tull, but Ian Anderson, he'd stand on one leg and play the flute. I mean, it was bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
Not heavy metal. I'm sorry, I've never heard a flute in heavy metal.
Yeah. No, Zamfir.
Zamfir. Zamfir. That's a good one. Dude. Oh, yeah. Boy, you pulled that one out of the... way back in the file cabinet on that one.
Totally showing my age there.
So, hey, let me get... Before we wrap up, we're going... long show tonight. You guys, I can't believe we went to, this long on both shows. We really got a lot of information out there for 1989, and I seriously didn't see it coming. But I do have a shout out from a couple of people on Twitter from last week. One of our people that we interact with quite a bit. It's 8675309 or 80's music, 80's girl 216. I think that's it. Wait, where'd it go? Hold on, my post went away. Okay, here we go. Cult Sonic Temple and Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood. And that is 80's girl 216. She's very interactive with us. And then you have 80's music girl, which is Rosemary, who is on the show with me and Dave on our 80s reboot all the time, and you've been on the show with her before, Chris, right? Have you talked to her, Tim? Have you ever been on a show with her?
No. She and I may be the same person because we're never in the same room or same location.
Nice. She mentioned the Cult, Sonic Temple, Skid Row, which we already covered both those. She also mentioned the Best of Oz from Ozzy, and Stradivarius, Fright Night.
Nice. That is a deep
That's a good
pick.
That's a good pick. I saw Stradivarius. I'm like, wow. She found that's a real gem right there. Best of Oz.
Stradivarius. If you don't never heard of Stradivarius, they're a Finnish prog metal band. I think back then, boy, this might have been their debut. Their early stuff. I don't know too well, but it was kind of power metal. I think they had a different singer. I think Timo Tolkki, the guitar player, actually sang on maybe the first one or two albums. But then they hit their stride, and they got a little bit more melodic. And Jens Johansson from Yngwie's band became their keyboard player for a long time. And they put out a string of really, really good power progressive metal, neoclassical type albums.
It is their debut album, by the way. Fright Night. So, I got a quick question. I got a couple more shout-outs real quick.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
A lady I work with named Karen wanted me to bring up Aerosmith's Pump. She's a huge Aerosmith fan. And frankly, I thought one of you two would bring this one up.
Another debut album.
No.
No, I was looking at it, and it was on the outskirts of my list, but it was something that crossed my mind.
Because it's another one that they got a lot of accolades for Janie's Got a Gun, which was played all the time, and sure, I'll give them that, but that wasn't my favorite song. So it was another one of those cases where I kind of got burned out just because of what was being played. But Lovin' in Elevator is a great song, and I really like The Other Side quite a bit too. So there's definitely some good stuff on here.
I like The Other Side. Cannot stand Lovin' in Elevator.
Really?
Yeah. I think it was just maybe just because it was overplayed.
Okay. Well, it certainly was.
Yeah.
And one more, my buddy Brad mentioned Faith No More is the Real Thing.
Okay.
That one was
I skimmed past that one too.
That was a pretty big album. I mean, it was definitely different. It was one of the ones that you felt like something new was starting with those guys. And that song, Epic, was, my God, that was all over the place for being such an oddball song compared to what else was popular. It just didn't fit, and it probably scared some people because it didn't fit. But everyone knew it was like, wow, this Mike Patton guy, that boy can sing. The song's a little wacky, but that boy can sing.
Yeah, I liked their Midlife Crisis that came out a few years later. Is that was Faith No More, right?
I think so. I'm not a scholar on all things Faith No More, but
yeah, it's one that I've heard on the radio a few times, and I downloaded it. That's a good one.
Then they had a Black Sabbath cover somewhere in here too, didn't they? Was that on The Real Thing? Yeah, War Pigs. That was it.
Oh, War Pigs.
Yeah.
I've
never heard that version of it. I'll have to go and listen to it.
It's not terrible.
No,
it's not. It's surprisingly not. I mean, they sing it like Faith No More sings it, but it's not terrible. But I was never a big fan of a lot of Aerosmith's after the 70s stuff. It never translated for me. It just didn't. I mean, obviously they got very popular again. But it was just never something I felt like listening to, and so that the Aerosmith just never. I like their old stuff, I'm stuck on 70s Aerosmith. I can't seem to translate the 80s Aerosmith. Doesn't really translate for me.
I gotta say I'm with you on that one. I go back to the early stuff for them.
I know it's totally
They're
two
like
totally different bands.
It does really seem like they're two totally different bands.
They are. I mean, realistically, they are. I mean, it's two totally different bands, coming from two totally different places in life, and all that kind of stuff. It just after
the fall, right?
Yeah, and I mean, but great story to resurrect themselves in that fashion, because there's not a lot of bands that would have been like they were in the late 70s, early 80s, and just making terrible music and not making any music at all for years, and to come back, you got to give it to them. They did reinvent themselves, but the music in itself just it never really translated for me.
Cool. You got any more shout-outs, or are we good?
I'm done with shout-outs. I could still talk for another half hour, but we probably got to
put a nail on these. We're at an hour 40.
I think this is going to be a two-part epic. We're going to have to split this up.
A three-parter. It's 3 parts. Wow.
Yeah, we should do I mean, if you consider it, do like a complete follow-up show about like what we took from 80s music, what we think about it today, and could be like a final show that just encompasses different parts of the 80s or something like that. It would be kind of fun just to sew everything up from all year. 'Cause everything is so spread out from what we did.
Here's what I'm
recording
thinking.
Wise.
I know, we had that whole technical issue, it kind of threw a wrench into the whole system. What I'm thinking is, okay, we've talked about like our favorites of each year. Can we challenge ourselves to pick the top 3 albums of the decade?
We could, but we're going to talk about stuff we already talked about, right?
Yeah, no, we could just throw them out there as our picks, as our favorites. We don't have to talk in depth about them. You know what I'm saying? Just say like which ones were really, if you had to pick the 3 top ones of the whole decade, what would those be? So we'll touch base again.
Thriller.
Footloose soundtrack. Or the soundtrack to Rhinestone.
Walk Like an Egyptian.
All right. Well, I'll try to put some ideas together. We definitely have to have follow up. We can't just let it go at 1989 and just and end it. So we'll see any ideas that we can come up with, and you guys can shoot me any ideas too, and we'll go from there. So let's go ahead and do the social media stuff and sign off, and we'll wrap it up. So you can find me at 80's Mixtape Auto Reverse on Twitter, or actually it's at 80's Auto Reverse, and then also at Scott's Eye, and on Facebook it's at Mixtape or 80's Mixtape Auto Reverse. Sorry, it's too many things to talk about. Tim, what do you got for us?
I got 30 more albums I can talk about.
Come on.
Since you're kicking me off, if you want to stay up,
we could do another show on 1989 if you really want to do like a part 3.
No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
I was going to say, if anybody wants to find me on social media and talk about albums from 1989 until the wee hours, I'm on Twitter, TSW512. Excuse me. I'm on Twitter at TSW512, and Facebook is just my name, Tim Wodzinski. Or you can find me through 80's Mixtape Auto Reverse.
And Facebook is my name, Christopher Warren, and on Twitter it is at Christopher's.
Very cool. So, Tim, you were tweeting, or you sent a few links to some of the videos. I posted those on Twitter too, so if you guys want to retweet them and send them around, see if people take a look at them. Those the songs that you sent. I'm looking forward to hearing them myself. So, thanks for sharing them so quickly. Like we're on the phone and I'm like getting these. We're talking. I'm getting messages on my phone saying that I'm getting these all these messages. So anyway, all right, guys. Well, have a great night, and we will talk to everybody later.
All right.
See ya.
Metal. All right, we're clear. Hey, Tim, real quick. I was going to bring this up earlier, and I think you'd be the person that would remember this video. And it drives me nuts because I can still see some of the video in my head. And I can never figure out who it was or what song it was. It was a typical, stage performance, not big concert stage type, but like performing to the camera type of stage performance for the video setting. There was no fancy stuff going on, but it was the lead singer had like straight blonde hair, and he was wearing these furry white boots that were like knee high. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
No, not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. I was hoping somebody would remember what that is, because it haunts me. Like, I'm never going to figure out what that video was. But I remember seeing it on MTV, often enough to where it stuck in my head. And I'm like, those are the goofiest looking boots I've ever seen. They were white furry boots, like long hair. And this guy, he was blonde. He looked like he could have been probably, one of those bands from Finland or Germany or somewhere up in the north. A Norse type guy. So, anyway, if you come across it and you figure it out, let me know, because it drives me nuts.
I'm Googling some things right now, and nothing. For some reason, the band Helix popped into my head, but I don't think Brian Vollmer ever wore furry white boots. I mean, he wore some silly stuff, but he had a holster on his hip for his microphone to go in. But I remember what
he looked like, and it was not him. This guy he really had like blonde hair and probably blue eyes, and his hair was really straight and long. So, I don't know.
All I know is fairies wear boots.
Fairies wear boots. You gotta believe me. That's an awesome song.
It is a great song. We used to do a cover of that song.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Good song.
Like, how did you play it? Was it heavier or was it similar?
It was heavier. It was more like modernized, but pretty similar. Yeah, similar.
That's great. That
heavier.
Classic Sabbath. I love that.
Yeah,
stuff.
I love that. Like that song a lot. So.
Cool.
All right,
guys. It's late, and yes, I do have to work tomorrow.
So. A good one.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80's Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80's Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80's Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.